Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to the J.J. McCullough and P.F. Jung Justice for Ghislaine charity stream. We're happy to have you. It turns out that Ghislaine Maxwell is trafficked to no one. We have the wonderful Great White Hope Donald Trump, who released a statement recently saying that Jeffrey Epstein, this whole thing was manufactured by Democrats, and Ghislaine being in prison is simply a witch hunt. So great stuff. JJ, welcome to the charity stream.
Well, I don't get where this particular talking point comes from the conspiracy set. Just like, oh, she's in prison for nothing. Oh, who did she traffic to? She trafficked to Jeffrey Epstein. That's the
And no one else, right? And no one else.
Well, I mean, that's why she's in prison, is because she was accused of being complicit in the trafficking of women to Jeffrey Epstein, right? Like, so the idea like she's some sort of patsy who did nothing wrong, and it's like some great mystery, and that it's like some huge missing piece of the puzzle why she would be in prison. I mean, that seems pretty disingenuous, right?
Yeah. Well,
I mean,
it
and
is
that's been
hilarious.
And that's been part of the problem, I think. But I mean, I think that's been part of the problem, is that people kind of just tuned out the Ghislaine Maxwell trial because it didn't reinforce a kind of more sensationalistic story that clearly we've seen a lot of people are very, very invested in.
Yeah,
and will not take no for an answer.
Let me, if you don't mind, I will.
Yes.
I will read the statement from the one and only Great White Hope. What's going on with my boys, and in some cases gals? They're all going after Attorney General Pam Bondi, who's doing a fantastic job. We're on one team, MAGA, and I don't like what's happening. We have a perfect administration, the talk of the world, and selfish people are out to hurt us. I'm not going to read the whole thing. Why are we giving, here are the key ones. Why are we giving publicity to files written by Obama, Crooked Hillary, Comey, Brennan, so on and so forth? The people who came up with the Steele dossier, which is a very interesting comparison. Yes. Why don't these radical left lunatics release the Epstein files? If there was anything in it that could have hurt the MAGA movement, why didn't they use it? The answer, of course, being they're all on the same island having sexual relations with the same children, Bill Clinton and Donald Trump and all that. Basically, yeah, the summary is, JJ.
Well, there's quite a few things. I feel like
Go
this
ahead.
is worth
Go ahead. You set the tone. Whoops.
Taking some time to deconstruct. Can you put it back on the screen?
Yeah. I'll let you establish the frame here. Okay, I'll let you poison the well.
Because I mean, like this particular bleat has been analyzed in quite some detail, and I think it's worth that we sort of look at what it does and doesn't say. So I mean, clearly, like the way it's being set up is that Trump is rushing to the defense of Attorney General Pam Bondi, who has sort of emerged as kind of the great villain of the MAGA set, because of course we can never criticize Donald Trump directly. We can only criticize, his scheming advisors who are misleading the benevolent king, right? And so the fact that Attorney General Bondi put out this memo the other day that I'm sure we've all seen by now that made a number of declarative statements, such as that Epstein died by his own hand in prison, and that there was no evidence that he was blackmailing anyone, and that there was no list of clients. The fact that her Justice Department put this out has led to a lot of MAGA people saying, like, wait a second, Trump promised us all of those things. He promised us the proof that it wasn't a suicide. He promised us that he would, deliver the client list. That Pam Bondi herself promised the client list. So if any of these things have not been disclosed, it must be the fault of Pam Bondi. And now, and there's been a lot of sort of hating on, like, fire Pam Bondi. Dan Bongino, the deputy director of the FBI, has sort of been reported to have some tension with her. And so it's very telling that amidst, like, a very obvious opportunity for Trump to throw Pam Bondi under the bus and kind of appease the MAGAs and appease their narrative, he's doing the exact opposite and saying, actually, I stand by Pam Bondi. It's you people, the MAGA hordes, who are really out to lunch. And so that's the first part.
Hold on. But because I worry that we're going to go too into the weeds before we get to there's the fundamental issue here. Okay.
But I mean, but the weeds matter, right? Because
the weeds do matter.
Because the second part is then Trump acknowledging the existence of the files. So, like, his government has denied the existence of the Epstein client list, but they are in this bleat, he's acknowledging the existence of Epstein files, which is, a broad sort of expansive term that could include any number of things. But the telling thing is that he is now framing the Epstein files as being the work of the scheming Democrats.
Correct. Like the
So,
Steele dossier, the one that Hillary
Exactly.
Clinton's law firm created, Fusion GPS.
Yes. Yeah. So he's putting it in that sort of same kind of canon of
Right, which is total bullshit. Right?
Well, yeah, I mean, it is. Well, it is. I don't know. Like,
I know. See. Here's the thing. JJ, you are in such an interesting position. Okay, and everyone has been dying to hear our take on this. Okay, or rather our exchange on this.
Okay.
Because, and I did some meditating before this to make sure I don't get angry or upset. Okay. Correct me if I'm wrong. You believe generally that there was no broader conspiracy behind Jeffrey Epstein, right? That he was not blackmailing people, that he was trafficking children by himself, and he didn't involve people like Prince Andrew or Bill Gates or Bill Clinton or Donald Trump or any of those people, correct?
I don't believe that Epstein was the center of some sort of global elite, procurement, system whereby sort of the most powerful men in the world all gathered together and, had sex with minors, and that there's some elaborate cover up that only Jeffrey Epstein himself was capable of disclosing. And then the government, sort of covertly murdered him in order to prevent him from spilling the dirt on this global elite pedophile cabal that he was the head of. I don't accept that narrative.
Fine.
Right. And it seems to me that that the onus is on people that do believe that narrative to provide evidence of it happening in any capacity. And it seems to me that a lack of evidence is not evidence, but that seems to be the assumption that everybody is operating on, right? That because none of this evidence showing that Epstein was the head of, procuring, underage women for Bill Gates and Bill Clinton and so forth, that somehow that is just proof, that is somehow more proof that that was in fact happening. And that if we have not obtained the proof, it's because there's an ongoing conspiracy now manifest by the Trump administration and Pam Bondi to deny us, the truth-seeking public, any of that evidence.
Round of applause for this incredible mental gymnastics routine from JJ McCullough. Well done, everyone.
That is not an incredible...
JJ, I'll ask you a direct question. Question.
Okay.
Do you believe that people like Donald Trump, Bill Clinton, Bill Gates, Prince Andrew, what is the probability that people like that, those, and you can pick your individual, whichever one is most incriminated, which of those individuals, what is the probability that any of those individuals knew exactly what was happening on that island?
Well, I think that is a different question. And
I'm asking you that question.
What is the probability?
Yeah. What is the probability that Bill Clinton, let's say, who wrote on the Lolita Express 26 times?
Well, Bill Clinton claims he didn't know. I mean, to my understanding, Bill Clinton claims that he didn't know.
Donald Trump claims the election was stolen, JJ. I'm asking you.
Yeah.
What do you think is the probability that let's pick Bill Clinton, that Bill Clinton was aware, at minimum, I'm not even asking participated, but was aware of what Jeffrey Epstein was doing when it related to minors?
To what extent do we think that Bill Clinton was aware that Jeffrey Epstein was having sex with underage women?
Yes.
I don't know. I honestly don't know.
Ballpark, 50-50?
I guess maybe. I don't know. I don't want. So hold on, Paul. Before you start making your orgasmic noises of delight, I think I honestly have not researched that side of it deeply enough to say with confidence. All I know is that they have, people like Bill Clinton, Bill Gates, and so forth. They have gone on the record denying that, that they were aware of that.
Yeah, and Dinesh D'Souza said he found all these stuffed ballots in the 2020 election. They went on the record.
Well, I don't know. But again, at some point, I suppose it does become just a matter of how believable you find these people to be.
Correct.
And if there would... And then, so as it stands now, we have their word, we have their testimony, and then what do we have to prove the alternative, right? That is sort of how evidentiary standards work in the American system, right? So, barring...
I'm not asking to make a legal conviction, JJ. I'm asking you the J.J. McCullough, the real person who lives in the real world and is capable of making estimates as to whether or not things are true based on inductive reasoning and common sense.
Yeah.
Because it is the case that if there's enough circumstantial evidence that actually is, you can convict people even though there's not a single piece of conclusive evidence. So when we look at Bill Clinton riding that plane 26 times, being on that island, when we look at Epstein's connections to Israeli intelligence, the CIA, when Alex Acosta says
you're already
Epstein belonged to intelligence. I'm just, you're fine. We'll get to his intelligence connections in a minute. I'm just asking you, do you think, such as they are, right? Yeah. You're telling me you don't believe, you don't think it's plausible, you don't think it's reasonable for people to strongly suspect that there was a ring of elite people engaging in this type of behavior. You think people who believe that are going too far or are unsubstantiated?
I think the onus is on people that believe those things to provide evidence of those things happening. Not just to sort of have a conversation like this in which we're sort of talking about like, well, what do we think is like, and because then it just becomes a sort of like a litmus test of the moral character of these people, which is an inherently subjective thing. I think that, Bill Clinton has
it's inherently subjective. Whether if someone has sex with minors, it's inherently subjective about their moral claim.
That's not what I'm saying at all, Paul. I'm saying that if you're going to argue that sort of people like Bill Clinton and Bill Gates are lying and that they knew much more than they were leading on, then that ultimately is a sort of subjective assessment of how just inherently trustworthy or dishonest we consider these men to be. I think that Bill Clinton has not lived his life completely, bathed in glory, but I would like to think that all things considered, he's probably not a man who would knowingly cover up like sex crimes against minors. I just happen to believe that I think Bill Clinton is of higher moral character than that.
Wow.
I think this is for Bill Gates.
Wow. Prince Andrew too?
Prince Andrew, I think that one seems a little dodgier, but because Prince Andrew was accused of specific, and they ultimately he settled with the accuser. So you could argue that, when people settle for undisclosed amounts of money under unclear situations, like, that is different than being found evidence of the accusations. So, but again, the point I want to just emphasize.
When Fox News paid its $800 million fine to Dominion, did not involve an acknowledgement of guilt.
Yeah, indeed. And so Fox News can be...
And people like you would go, well, it's actually unreasonable for people to suspect that Fox News was lying.
No,
they settled out of court. Virginia Giuffre accused Prince Andrew. There's a picture of them.
Yes.
With Ghislaine Maxwell.
I mean, it's different, and the analogy you're drawing is not a perfect one because, with the Fox News stuff, we could all see very clearly what they were broadcasting, right? When you're dealing with a claim of, impropriety between two individuals, it does ultimately come down to the testimonies of the individuals involved, and then
I will say
we can't assess that, right? We can't assess that because we weren't there. We were there when we saw what Fox was broadcasting during the election.
In some sense, I don't believe that there's no amount of evidence I could provide you that would change your mind, JJ. In fact, I did provide an incredible amount of evidence in my live stream. My corkboard
your live stream was real exercise.
Fine. Let's just go, independent of, correct. Obviously, we're not going to have any clear, conclusive smoking evidence as to whether or not Trump or whether or not Clinton or whether or not Bill Gates or any of these people were blackmailed or were part of this ring. Okay, fine. I'm not going to argue with you about that. There's people who
there could be. But the thing is,
there could be, and it's on Pam Body's desk, and they said don't release it.
No. What I'm saying is,
I know. I'm a crazy kook. I'm a crazy kook.
As a matter of theoretical possibility, if such things happened, there could be evidence to prove it, right? And I feel like at some point, you have to sort of be able to accept that there is also a possibility that such evidence could not exist. And I think that it could not exist because the accusations in question.
You have to look. You have to accept.
Be something that you have to be open-minded about. And I feel like conspiracy theorists like you are not open-minded about that sort of possibility.
JJ, and I'm glad that you are holding yourself to the same standard, and that you're very open to the possibility that the 2020 election was in fact stolen. So anyway, this is. Well, let me get to the more important issue here. Okay, because this is indisputable. Jeffrey Epstein's ties to intelligence, and specifically Israel. You dared claim that my corkboard conspiracy video where I laid out the evidence was, I think, quote, the worst video I've ever made.
Definitely in the top 3, I would say.
The first question I will ask, this is just a procedural question. How much money have you taken from Israel to defend this? And if not, how much money from Qatar? Or I guess, no, I'm sorry, I get paid by Qatar. Israel or the DNC, Act Blue? Do you receive any money to make any of these talking points?
I do not, Paul.
Okay, I'm glad we got that out of the way. I do receive money from Qatar. Unironically, I actually do. And I hope people who are not good at deducing sarcasm.
Not in the context of making videos, though. That's just for unrelated.
Yeah, correct. For unrelated smuggling. Jeffrey Epstein belonged to intelligence. This was the quote that Alex Acosta, former labor secretary under Donald Trump, said. Never denied it.
No, he said that he'd heard that someone had said that.
I was told, Alex Acosta said, I was told Epstein belonged to intelligence. That's why he gave them the lenient plea deal.
In which he said that.
Huh?
What was the context?
In his interviews with the Trump admin for his appointment to labor secretary.
Yes.
Right.
So
was he lying?
Evidence, right? No, I mean, that's hearsay, right? He's saying that I heard that. And, maybe he was saying it in the context of is this true or not, right? He's not saying it as a matter of definitive knowledge. He's saying that as a rumor that was going around, as it is clearly still going around.
So then that was his reason for why he gave them Epstein a lenient plea deal. What is your explanation for why he got such a lenient plea deal?
Well, what he says, if you watch his press conference, is that he wanted Epstein to go to prison and that this was a way to get him, behind bars, and that, the alternative was having a long trial that, he might get off on. Right. Acosta has said that he regrets that. Right. We know that he regrets that. But at the time, that was his logic. Right. That it's better.
That's what he told people.
It's better to negotiate, a plea that gets him in prison as opposed to subject him to a long trial, which he thought he might have got off on. Just in the same way that a lot of people thought that Ghislaine Maxwell might have got off.
Sure. Okay, so hold on. So we have Alex Acosta said, I was told he belonged to intelligence. And then he said, I want to make sure Epstein's in prison. Okay, either one of those could be true. You're choosing to focus on one and not the other. And perhaps in the same way, I'm choosing to focus on one and not the other, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so this alone is not enough. This is piece one of the puzzle.
Why would he abandon that line of argument, right? When you watch him in subsequent interviews, because this is why, as we know, why he had to quit the Trump cabinet was because this was becoming such a distraction that he felt for the good of the government, he had to step down.
Yes.
But, there's plenty of record of him talking about this, right? It's not like he only made one cryptic statement once. He does it. You can see him on the talk shows. He did press conferences. He explained his logic, and because he really thought that he could survive this, right? He thought that he could stay in the Trump cabinet if he just clearly stated why he did what he did. And when you see him give interviews, he says that I wanted to get Epstein behind bars. This seemed like a safer way to do that, or more a more definitive, an easier way to do that than subject him to a long trial.
Right. That's what he told people publicly. And when he told people,
why can we not believe that his publicly stated explanations? Why wouldn't he just say?
Because he also said, I was told that Epstein belonged to intelligence. So how could we rule that out?
So why did he not use that as his defense?
Because you can't tell the public that the most serial fucking pedophile was part of the intelligence agencies. Don't you think that would reflect poorly on the government of which he's trying to be a part of?
Not if he's trying to save his skin. You would say whatever.
Oh my God. All right, hold on. This is about one piece of the puzzle. One of the the circumstantial evidence. Okay, puzzle piece one. That alone, I agree. We can't convict. The glove doesn't fit. We must acquit at this point. But there's other pieces of evidence, JJ. Jeffrey Epstein and his ties to Ehud Barak. Forget the CIA for a moment. The ties to Mossad. Tucker Carlson at TPUSA right, said very clearly, Epstein was a part of the Israeli intelligence wing.
Yeah, also provided no evidence, just sort of talked in his cocksure Tucker Carlson way and acted as if you just say things confidently enough, and if you just present a lack of evidence as evidence, that's enough to sort of appease the braying mob.
Jeffery Epstein
Uh-huh.
went into business with Ehud Barak.
Yes.
Ehud Barak, former prime minister of Israel,
Yes, I remember them well.
ex-head of IDF intelligence. Ghislaine Maxwell.
One of the most decorated soldiers in Israeli history.
Exactly.
When he was,
and Jeffrey Epstein went.
I remember his prime ministership, Paul.
And you seem to conveniently forget it when it, when the government demands how much Donald Rumsfeld paid you to forget all this shit. You forget it when on command. Ghislaine Maxwell is the daughter of Israeli super spy Robert Maxwell, who at his funeral 6 former heads of Israeli intelligence attended. One of them, Yitzhak Shamir, said he has done more for Israel than can today be told. That's the father of Ghislaine Maxwell. So Epstein is a business partner of Ehud Barak. After the convictions come out, Ehud Barak continues to meet with him. Netanyahu used this as a political cannon fire, or was it cannon fodder, political ammunition against Ehud Barak.
Yeah.
And you're telling me it's not plausible to believe that Epstein ran in the circles, the intelligence circles, after Acosta said he belonged to intelligence. His accomplice is the daughter of a super spy. In business with Ehud Barak, former prime minister.
Yeah. It's not.
Let alone him. What's that?
I said that's not evidence of the claim, right? That's the evidence.
Sure. Okay. We just established.
No, to prove that he's an intelligence agent, you have to provide evidence that he's an intelligence agent, not evidence. Just other
wrong.
things.
Okay, first off, if there's enough circumstantial evidence, you can convict someone beyond a reasonable doubt.
But I don't think you are aware of that. The world would consider that persuasive evidence that he was an intelligence agent. You're making an argument that he was employed in a very particular capacity for this foreign government.
Then
right?
you
That's
tell
a very
me,
high charge, right?
What do you think? What do you think is the alternative story? Because the one that is obviously borne out by the facts is one that he runs in those circles and is an asset.
Yes.
So what is your alternative?
You don't have to say the two things, right? He can run in the circles without being an asset. I mean, he was a wealthy, well-connected American Jew, and I think that.
Whoa, hold on. Let's not be anti-Semitic, JJ. Holy shit.
No. But what I'm saying is that when you have it's not anti-Semitic or it's not radical to suggest that the very elite of sort of American sort of Jewish society often has connections with the elite of Israeli society. That doesn't mean that they're conspiring to destroy America or whatever. It just means that, a lot of American Jews are very pro-Israel, are invested in Israel in various ways. They have family there and so on and so forth. Yeah. And, the Israeli sort of elite sort of sees the American Jewish elite as being, common allies to, help the reputation of the country and, make the country legitimate in the eyes of other American Jews and America as a whole. This is not conspiratorial stuff. I think most,
it's rational.
American Jews would admit that very openly because they believe in Israel. And so, and like I said, there's just a lot of human to human kind of cross-cultural sort of exchanges and connections. And so I don't think it's at all shocking to believe that a wealthy and well-connected American Jew like Jeffrey Epstein would also be well-connected with the Israeli elite in a way I think that a lot of, rich and successful American Jews are in a non-sort of conspiratorial way. So
yeah, that's true. If we weren't talking about someone who was a serial pedophile and had an island where every room, including the bathrooms, were rigged up with camera equipment and audio equipment.
Yeah. So if you sort of let's take for example, somebody say Alan Dershowitz, who was accused of one of Epstein's.
Correct.
Alan Dershowitz, I bet you anything, has knows a lot of Israeli prime ministers on a first name basis and, that kind of thing. And probably knows a lot of the top businessmen in Israel, because he's a very prominent member of the American Jewish community. And again, these sort of natural connections exist. Or you could pick, I don't know, just pick any other really high profile, super elite Jewish American. And I'm sure that they have connections with the Israeli elite.
No one's disputing this.
But you could tell a similar story, I'm sure, about a lot of other sort of high power, especially somebody like Epstein, who is known for spreading his money around, right? Which is why we know so many of the elite Americans, Jewish or otherwise, wanted to be in close proximity to him. And I think that's the clearest explanation of why, say, Ehud Barak was interested in him, because from what I understand, Ehud Barak is a bit of a, kind of, I don't know, less than fully ethical politician himself, and a man who, was involved in various business schemes and probably had a sense like, oh, there's this rich American Jewish guy and he'll give me a lot of money. He's a big supporter of Israel. If I can, play the patriotism card with him and get some money out of him, right? I think that's probably the Occam's razor explanation, as opposed to the idea that, Prime Minister Ehud Barak like knew Epstein and wanted to work with Epstein because Epstein was like some sort of proven secret agent in the Israeli government.
No, it's not. Dude, you don't even. You talk about Occam's razor. Epstein, rich and well connected.
Yes.
Okay, he's an access agent, so you can't just arrange a direct meeting between a government agent and a foreign minister. So you meet through somebody. Occam's razor. Ehud Barak continued to meet with him after he knew about the convictions. I think he said more than 10, but definitely less than 100 was the exact quote.
Yeah.
Okay, so Ehud Barak knows this guy is a convicted pedophile.
Yeah, which reflects
continues to meet with him.
Ehud Barak, right?
Okay, so...
Yeah, but so that shows that Ehud Barak is a man of like low moral character. That doesn't show that Jeffrey Epstein is an Israeli secret agent.
Oh... As I said, of course you will not find a conclusive single piece of evidence. But when we look at the total picture, this is my point. And obviously, there's nothing like I said, there's nothing I could present to you all of the pieces of the puzzle.
No, this is just, Paul,
Epstein, hold on, no, I'll walk you through it.
On some level, Paul, this
I'll walk you
is
through
not
it.
Particularly strong evidence. Like, you have to accept that. These are little scraps of things.
I think you're in denial.
Don't really add up to a persuasive case.
No, I think there's a significant amount of circumstantial evidence that when you put it together, overwhelmingly leads to is Epstein was an intelligence asset, not necessarily a formal agent, but was involved in intelligence in ways that are very morally decrepit and suspicious. Okay, Alex Acosta says Epstein belongs to intelligence. Epstein is in business dealings with Ehud Barak, former prime minister and ex-head of intelligence, after Ehud Barak knew about the convictions. Ghislaine Maxwell is the daughter of the most prolific Israeli intelligence agent of all time, arguably, Robert Maxwell. Ari Ben Menshi says explicitly that the Israeli, I forget what he was, hold on, says Epstein was a Mossad agent, just explicitly, outright. Ari Ben Menshi. You have his island rigged up to the wazoo with cameras and audio equipment. He gets all this fucking money from, we still don't know where.
Well, from his business dealings, presumably.
Okay, where? Well, he's a multi-billionaire. That's part of the story. So we have all these pieces, and then I agree. You cannot say, therefore conclusively he is. But here's what I would say. Anyone who says that people who believe there's a very high likelihood that what the Trump administration says about Epstein is covering stuff up, covering important information that is significant, having to do with deep moral decrepancy and corruption. If anyone who believes that is a conspiracy kook, I think that's unbelievable cope. I think that's insane.
Well, Paul, I suppose at the end of the day, the Epstein files probably should be released. I mean, like, I'm not averse to that. Like, I think that if that's
sure
what
sounds
it takes
like you are, JJ.
No. If that's what it takes to, put a lid on this stuff and end the endless speculation, I would be in favor of it. Right? We don't know, because like it's worth saying as well, like when we talk about like, the Epstein files, like this is a sort of broad term that can mean different things to different people. Presumably it relates to the FBI case on him and the case that the prosecutors had and, all of that stuff that the federal government would have access to, as opposed to, I think, the more sort of conspiratorial take on it, which is that like, I guess some sort of detailed report saying like Epstein's our guy and here's what he was doing, and for Israel and maybe for America too, like, and here's how he was procuring all of the women for the, the secret ruling star chamber that governs everything, right? the idea that there was like a client list, which is like some sort of like itemized list of like, okay, here's the names and here's how many women, we procured for each of them, right? Like this kind of stuff is, I think, non-existent.
Sure, I'm not.
People that have reported this story, much more closer than you or I have sort of cast doubt on the likelihood that there was any sort of list. But yeah, the broader...
Actually, no, I would dispute that. Go look up CoffeeZilla's reporting on this.
CoffeeZilla
he said the exact opposite.
Oh! He's not. You look at somebody like, say, like Julie Brown.
Let's clip that. At CoffeeZilla. JJ McCullough says CoffeeZilla's not a serious reporter. Drama, YouTube drama.
Okay, I like CoffeeZilla. I think he's great in a lot of ways. I think he's a little out to lunch on this particular one.
Is he? Yeah, I'm sure.
But like, say, I was listening to an interview earlier with Julie K. Brown. She was like the reporter at the newspaper in Miami that first broke this story, right? And she is, I'd say, like probably more open-minded to some of the conspiratorial aspects of the story, but not others. And it's interesting to listen to somebody like her who, attended the Ghislaine Maxwell trial like every day and, again, like broke the story and has been on the Epstein beat as a serious, like award-winning reporter for a very long time, not just someone who's kind of like doing what we're doing and just kind of like reacting to like things that we've read in the press that other people have reported on. And she says, like, when she's asked about it, that she thinks it's very, very unlikely that there was ever a client list. She doesn't say that. Like,
and Vicky Ward, the investigative journalist, says the opposite.
Yeah, she is, I think, a much more sort of dubious.
Oh, well, there we go. Well, JJ's ultimate subjective view of people's character is the barometer by which we'll do this.
No.
But yeah, Bill Clinton definitely had enough moral character to not, be a pedophile of children, even though he fucked a 22-year-old as the president in the White House, which is a meme now, obviously, the whole Monica Lewinsky thing. But if you think about the psychology of the person that does that as the president of the United States, it's truly fucking depraved. In a serious way.
We can still accept that there are moral gradients to these sorts of things, Paul. And I think having a consensual affair with a legal adult, as bad and objectionable as we would think it would be, that is still in a different moral universe than someone who is actively covering up.
It's certainly,
right?
Yeah. But in enough, when enough, like I said, enough pieces of the puzzle come forward, a broader image appears. And look, as I said, again, there's no conclusive evidence. Of course not. No one is saying there is. And really, I'm just curious as to how your mind works on how you can reject all of this circumstantial evidence. Can I ask you something directly?
What now, Paul?
Do you fear what the world would be like if there was an elite pedophile ring running things? Are you afraid of that world? Is part of what
I'd be afraid if the world was run by vampires or lizard people or whatever.
Yeah, but one is far more likely than the other.
I guess. I mean, either way, it requires an enormous suspension of disbelief. That there's been a cover up at such a high level, right? That there would be.
There's a lot of people I think like you that are like, I just can't. Like, if it was the case that, holy shit, Bill Clinton, Donald Trump, the whole government, like, they're all, like, there's this whole section of the government that's literally, engaging in pedophilia. It's like, that's, my whole faith in humanity would fall apart. So it'd be like the earth being flat. It's like, no. This is very basic ritual psychology, JJ. Okay, I was in a fraternity. Many people are in fraternities. Yes. You've heard of hazing in fraternities and fraternity rituals, right?
Yes.
But you know about the rituals, right? Like lighting candles and going into basements and all that.
My grandfather was a Mason, right? Like, so I know,
a Freemason, right? You say? A
Freemason, right?
Well, the final piece of the puzzle comes into play. Oh my God, JJ. I should have known. Unbelievable. Ladies and gentlemen, we now have, we have our smoking gun. JJ confirmed Freemason descendant. No, surely then you will know. Okay, you will know about all the rituals. It is simply the case that you could see this at the level of like fraternities at universities. The lamer fraternities would have very limited rituals that nobody took seriously, and the more prestigious, higher social status the fraternity, the more tight, secret, and elaborate the ritual. Okay, you just scale that up to the highest levels of power, and you get to touching kids because it's the ultimate taboo. What is the other explanation for these type of rings? Because independent of whether or not you think Epstein is one, these rings occur in other instances. It's like, what is the explanation for? Are they trying to summon demons? No, that is the conspiracy theorist nonsense.
Well,
it's basic ritual psychology.
But like, okay, I think it's worth sort of like, stepping down a little bit here. Like the allegation or the claim that has been adjudicated in the Ghislaine Maxwell trial and was recently sort of reinforced by the FBI or by the Justice Department memo is that Jeffrey Epstein was a prolific, abuser of women underage and otherwise. And that the Justice Department memo claimed that he had victimized over 1,000 women, which is an incredible, astonishing number. And like, clearly this was a man who was like depraved in all sorts of terrible ways, but also depraved at like a very massive scale, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that, if it seems to me like that's the story, right? Like the story is that there was this terrible man who was sex trafficking women to himself in order to satisfy his sort of perverted sexual desires. And, maybe there was aspects of him in which he sort of thought that he could portray himself as being part of a sort of licentious lifestyle that would be attractive to other men. It seems like there's a lot of evidence to suggest that a lot of these other men were kind of creeped out by that and wanted to withdraw from it.
Sure. Not everyone who knew Epstein is a pedophile, for sure.
No, but I mean, like, it's the idea that like Epstein was a very uniquely evil man, and the idea that like his evil,
the degree to which his connections amongst powerful people were present is what makes his story unique. I agree, it's not uniquely evil. There's pedophiles across the board.
But what makes it explicable is that he was not just an evil guy. He was also a very wealthy guy, and a guy who was very, eager to open his checkbook and fund various things, or at least lead people to believe he was, generous in that sort of way. And that's, what a lot of the men who have been linked to him have said, is that they were sucking up to him because they wanted his money primarily, and that there was a lot of aspects of him that were disgusting and offensive, and that they realized.
That's what Eric Weinstein, for example, or Steven Pinker.
Yes. And so I just don't know, like, why is that an insufficient explanation, especially when so many of the men that were sort of within 1 degree removed from Epstein have said on the record. Like, why can't we trust them when they say such things? Especially if we accept the premise that, like, pedophilia is a monstrous crime. It's not something that your average guy is tempted by or interested in.
JJ, like I said, I admire the degree to which you cling to the safety of such a worldview in which it's just one bad guy. And even though Bill Clinton flew on his plane 26 times, and even though Alex Acosta said directly he belonged to intelligence, and even though Epstein had direct ties to Ehud Barak, ex-head of IDF intelligence, former prime minister, all of which associated with him after they knew he was a pedophile. We just don't explore that anymore. We just go.
Let me ask you a question, Paul. And
Please.
Actually, this is something that I'm actually kind of sincerely interested in, and I would ask Julie Brown and any of the other reporters this as well. Why is it that more of the victims have not made more sort of sensationalistic allegations against specific men? Like, why is it just like Alan Dershowitz, Prince Andrew, and that's basically it, and then Epstein himself?
What do you mean?
Why have there not been? Well, I mean, why have there not been, like, why are these, the victims, like, I don't know, like, I sincerely don't know if the most sensationalistic claims were true, why would there not be more women sort of just telling these stories and going on television?
Virginia Giuffre said Prince Andrew raped her. What are you talking about?
I said Prince Andrew, and I said Alan Dershowitz, right? Like, those are the two big examples. But I don't know, like, why there haven't been more allegations on that scale.
Well, maybe there are. I don't know. I haven't. Those are the two that I'm aware of.
Why do we only know those two? I mean,
maybe because we're both ignorant and we should be better at our jobs.
But I mean, well, those ones were ones that were adjudicated.
Why don't we do some real-time research? How many women have come forth and
accused people other than Jeffrey Epstein?
Accused people in Jeffrey Epstein's circles.
There's one that the Trump was. We know that. That was actually the origin of the whole story. Is that there was a woman that accused Epstein and Trump of I believe having abused her. But we all just
a 2019 federal hearing In a 2019 federal hearing, according to Time magazine, 23 women provided testimony. 14 in person, 10 in their real names after Epstein's death. Now, to your point, this is accusing. We have to look into to see if who specifically they were accusing. Some religious associate. Who other than Epstein have had accusations levied against?
I feel like there was like a French guy, like some sort of like a French magnate, a French rich guy of some sort who was accused.
Sarah Ransom says international sex trafficking ring. So why is it when these women claim the things that happened and what they saw, we don't believe them as much? But when Alex Acosta says, I wanted to give him... Sarah Ransom, who said was the victim of Epstein's international sex trafficking ring. Yeah. Please finish what you have started in the pursuit of it, in the pursuit of closing it down.
But the sex trafficking ring is the sex trafficking of women to Epstein.
That's not what a trafficking ring is. A ring is multiple people.
It is. No, a ring is multiple people involved in the trafficking of people.
Okay, so other than Ghislaine and Jeffrey, who else is it?
Well, I mean, Epstein's various like minions are involved.
And associates, maybe even.
Well, yeah, sure.
Can I ask you a question? Why do you think every room, including the bathrooms in his island, were hooked up with cameras and sound recording equipment?
I don't know, because he was a pervert, Paul. I mean, that seems pretty obvious.
And that's it. There's no other plausible explanation.
Well, I mean, what's the counter explanation? To blackmail everybody?
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
And you think it's implausible to believe that?
I guess it's not implausible to believe that. I mean,
you're underwater.
Seem like
your microphone just went goofy.
My microphone?
It's fine now.
Okay. I mean,
is it reasonable to believe? This looks like a blackmail ring.
I guess. I mean, to me, it seems like the perversion explanation seems.
Two things can be true at once, JJ.
I guess so. I don't know. I mean, nobody's provided sort of persuasive evidence that they were blackmailed by Epstein.
So everyone who believes that Epstein was part of an intelligence operation and who was participating in a blackmail ring, people who believe that, you think are in the wrong for believing that? You think they're ignorant, they're misinformed, they're conspiratorial? Or do you think their assessment of the circumstantial evidence is different from yours?
I think that there has been, for a long time, a little something called Q-anon, Paul. And Q-anon posits, informed by kind of like biblical understandings or sort of a religious faith, that like the highest levels of the global elite are literal demons. And these demons engage in demonic exercises that only sort of the righteous power of Christ will be able to, combat. And that sort of like QAnon conspiracy theory about how power works in our modern world is very convincing to a lot of MAGA people, a lot of Republicans, a lot of evangelical Christians, and so on and so forth. And so I think that there is a desire to sort of see that sort of theory made true by events in the real world. And I think that there is this sort of stubborn insistence to make the Epstein story fit with pre-existing kind of QAnon theology.
Right, which is just a square peg in a round hole. There's nothing about Epstein that would fit into, the idea that there's a bunch of elite pedophiles.
My whole position on this has always just been that the Epstein story is bad enough. Like, it is monstrous what he did to as many women as he did. And it's monstrous what Ghislaine Maxwell did as his lead sort of accomplice and partner. And I don't know, like, it seems almost like kind of perverse in some ways that we don't tell a story that's focused on Epstein and his victims. We instead are forever kind of like unsatisfied that Epstein wasn't sinister in the way we've decided we would prefer him to be.
No, I think the perversity would be covering it up to the degree that it's there. And if the circumstantial evidence points in that direction, that's what's perverse. Well, and I think just because Kash Patel and Dan Bongino said that they looked at the files and they've concluded this.
Yeah, long-time
cool. RFK Jr. says vaccines cause autism. So I guess we're gonna go with him now.
Dan Bongino and Kash Patel, and I think even Pam Bondi herself, yeah, certainly, have been sort of longtime conspiracy theorists of this. They've been playing footsie
Right.
at the very least with the conspiracy theorists, and they've engaged in all sorts of rhetoric, sort of suggesting, whipping people up to get the MAGA base as paranoid as possible about the existence of this conspiracy. And thus, it motivates them to get to the polls and vote for Trump and all the rest of it. And maybe they sincerely believed it. Maybe it was just a game they were playing with their supporters. But in any case, it seems to me reasonable to conclude that once these people who have every reason in the world to, find the damning evidence and make it public, once they get into positions where they actually have access to that kind of information, the fact that they have, by all accounts, been quite humbled by reality, to me, that's a pretty persuasive bit of evidence that there might not be anything there, right? Because if not these people, if not these people, then who, right? Do you think that, for example, I can accept the premise that there is stuff in the Epstein files that, while not incriminating of Trump, is at the very least very embarrassing, because we do know that Trump and Epstein were good buddies, right? And we do know that Trump is a chronic philanderer and a chronic adulterer and that kind of stuff. And that sort of stuff might be in the files in a way that would damage Trump's pride and reputation. So I can accept the premise that that stuff's being concealed for, those sorts of reasons, as opposed to that it's just full of documents about all the children that Trump has had sex with or whatever. Right? That to me seems, but beyond that, is it not reasonable to conclude that when you install true Epstein conspiracy theory believing people in the highest ranks of government, and when those people come out and say, sorry, folks, there was less here than I thought, don't you think that there's something to be, some reason to...
Of course, there's The explanation is this would implicate our greatest ally, Israel. And all of those people have made pronouncements over and over and over again, how much they love Israel. Israel's our number one ally. And if it turns out that Israel was involved in a pedophile ring, that would not look good for them. And it would further undermine support for the country, which is already having its support undermined. And because it's a small country in the Middle East, the size of New Jersey, it relies on American support. So they have every possible incentive to not have this come out. That would be my perspective. And I guess you'd have to ask. I guess you'd have to ask who'd Barack.
Well, I think that I wouldn't say pedophile ring, but I think that if there was sort of say stuff in the Epstein files that did, for example, say that Epstein, if not a secret agent, on the direct sort of payroll of Mossad, if he was, at the very least, somebody that had some sort of relationship or had done work in the past or stuff like that, just relatively low scale, mostly innocuous stuff that, again, nevertheless is very embarrassing to the state of Israel.
Sure.
Then I think that's I think a fine, modest conspiracy theory to have.
Fine.
You
know what, JJ?
You'll concede that?
I'll take that. Okay,
you'll take that
as
much.
long as
you'll
it's
take that much.
As long as we're criticizing Israel, then I'm good. All right, then we're fine.
That gets you good. Okay, so I mean, okay, Paul.
Okay.
Moderate compromise position here.
Nobody loves moderate compromise more than I do.
Nobody loves moderate compromise before you. I think this is actually, as far as kind of conspiracy theories go, in the sense of something that we're just positing without hard evidence, but a reasonable conclusion to reach based on the evidence that we do have. I think it is reasonable to assume that there could be stuff in the Epstein files that is embarrassing to Trump or Israel.
Yes,
and I think
I would agree with that.
Okay, but to say embarrassing is different than to say sort of complicit in Epstein's crimes,
Fine.
let alone complicit in a larger criminal conspiracy of a sort that the public does not know the full flower of.
Fine, I accept that possibility, absolutely.
Okay.
And you do as well?
I accept the possibility that that's possible. Right. And that's why I would be in favor of getting the unredacted Epstein files, even though I also understand that is legally might be challenging in some ways.
Yes.
But again, a government that is committed to openness and so on and so forth will find a way to make that happen.
Well, JJ, the title of this stream will be JJ McCullough admits he is a Freemason. Speaking of criticizing Israel, you sent me a report a thorough investigative report of Netanyahu and his failures. Now, as much as I like talking about Zog and all that stuff and being anti-Israel, it is the case that I believe there are many Israelis who are on the right side of things, and Netanyahu is not one of them.
Wow.
And so whatever we can do to turn sentiment against Netanyahu and in favor of the left-wing Israelis, I'm happy to do. So what is this report, and what conclusions did you draw from it?
It's very good. I highly encourage everyone to read it. It's very long, but it is basically just like the full story of the Israel-Hamas war, basically beginning even before October 7th and then basically leading into the present day. And it's very damning of Netanyahu. It's very damning of, I think, the Israeli political system in many ways as well, because it basically sort of says that, it posits a number of sort of big conclusions, one of which was that Netanyahu did have reason to believe that an attack like October 7th was coming. He had been briefed extensively that some sort of attack of this sort should be his focus, but he was instead focused on Israeli domestic political things because he was very unpopular in the lead up to the attack. And then, during the war itself, he had many opportunities to make peace, including some rather quite extensive peace deals that would have sort of seen the normalization of relations with Saudi Arabia, say, and that again and again, he chose to turn down those deals and prolong the war, in part because he basically gave veto to Ben-Gvir and to Smotrich at all times, right? And that in the context, and again, if there is some sympathy to be had for Netanyahu, it's just that the Israeli political system seems like it gives way too much power to these minority factions, right? So these two men and their parties, their extremist parties, are forever kind of holding the dagger above Netanyahu's head. And they say, they're just constantly backseat driving him at every step of the process. And the second that there's any opportunity, whether it's from the Saudis or the Americans or whoever else, whether that relates to peace deals or bringing aid to Gaza or whatever else, Netanyahu always says no, because his hands are ultimately tied by these two radicals in his administration and who control large blocks in the Israeli parliament and can thus sort of no confidence vote him at any time. I think, though, that the argument that would be made against Netanyahu is that, sometimes statesmanship requires, just taking political risks, right? And just sort of saying, let the chips fall where they may. But what the report sort of shows is that Netanyahu is a man who, more than anything else, wants to stay in power because he's facing all of these sort of corruption charges and so forth that he doesn't, want to deal with. He doesn't want to go to prison. He has a certain immunity as long as he sort of stays prime minister. And, and a man as well that just has enormous faith in his own ability to sort of, I think, use the war in a way that will politically benefit him and keep him viable in the eyes of the Israeli electorate. So, yeah, it's a very complex, very richly reported piece. I'm not doing it full justice, attempting to give it a kind of snippy summary.
Sure.
But I think it is basically a story of a man who is a very sort of cynical politician who is captive to extremist factions within the Israeli political system and can't really make decisions independently of them. And a war that could have been ended much earlier on terms that I think would have been, quite impressive, but, has instead been, perpetuated.
Did it say anything about intelligence failures on October 7th and failure to respond by Netanyahu?
It said intelligence failures, I guess in the sense that they didn't see it coming specifically, but there was a lot of intelligence suggesting that some sort of big attack was coming. That because of Netanyahu's own unpopularity and because of the big protests and so forth, that Israel's enemies knew that Israeli society was in a weakened state. And that if anything, I think there's even sort of charges that because Netanyahu was so unpopular and there was all these big protests and things, that there was aspects of sort of the security apparatus that were participating in the protests, and that Israel's enemies were aware of that. And they were aware that the country was in a sort of unguarded state and that opened it up to attacks. And there's a specific anecdote about how Netanyahu responded on the day itself. I don't want to, I'm sort of misremembering some of the details, so I don't want to say anything out of turn. But it wasn't like he was ever given a notice that was like, Mr. Prime Minister, an attack is coming on October 7th and it's going to manifest in these ways.
Yeah,
but he was told to be on a state of heightened alert and to be prepared for anything. And it sounds like he just didn't take those briefings that seriously. Yeah, there's even sort of like there's like a thing where he had two phone calls. Like he has like two phones, like one which is like I guess his burner phone, and one that's a phone that like records everything that he says. And then like there was one sort of charge where when he was on the recorded phone, he like very affectedly said something like, "Well, the intelligence certainly never told me anything about this," which was like very disingenuous because on the other phone he had a conversation where he sort of alluded to otherwise.
That's fair. Well, nobody hates Netanyahu more than I do.
But I mean, it does, I suppose, in some ways, it would reinforce your thesis of the case or your, understanding of it, which is that these two sort of extremist men within the Israeli government have been the kind of driving forces. They're the real power behind this.
Ben Gvir and Smotrich.
Yeah.
Yes, and unfortunately, the demographic trends only point towards that direction, where the religious right, the extreme right, is having more and more kids compared to the secular Israelis. And I don't know how to parse that. And only time will tell. Maybe we start by arresting all the Israeli agents in our country. Jeffrey Epstein, well, he's already dead, so we don't have to worry about that one. All right. Well,
but you should. I do recommend you read it, Paul.
I will.
It is a real masterpiece of good reporting, and it's just a very vivid, as they say, a sort of TikTok in the old sense of the term, a TikTok report of just everything that went down, during this war that has now been close to 2 years going on for. So it's a very detailed story. There's been a lot of details, like, America's characters in it, the Israeli political system are characters in it, the other countries are characters in it. And I think Biden comes off pretty good in it. Like that Biden.
Oh, never mind. I'm not reading it. Fuck that. I'm not reading it. No, I'm just kidding.
He doesn't come off perfectly at all. But I mean, like, I think it does sort of show that, that Netanyahu was a man who was ultimately concerned with his coalition partners and staying in power, and was sort of willing to stand up to the Americans and everybody else, even when they were giving him a hard time. So
it's fair.
Yeah. I don't know. Where's this going, Paul? I don't know where this is.
We don't know.
This is heading. I mean, it does sort of say that, like, Netanyahu got a boost from the bombing of Iran, and that has in some ways maybe made him more popular, which is then give him a little bit more of a free hand to maybe start the process of negotiating a peace deal on his terms. But I don't know.
We'll see. One step at a time, JJ. Well, I'm glad we were able to reconvene. I'm glad we were able to get to the bottom of the Jeffrey Epstein story.
Yeah, in a way.
We'll do this again soon.
Of course.